Dashes, hyphens, and other punctuations. Function 2. To set off phrases that contain commas. In some complicated sentences, a group of words might need two types of commas. 1, commas between the words, and 2, commas that set off the whole group from the rest of the sentence. A pair of dashes can replace the second type of comma. Consider how confusing this sentence would be if commas were used instead of the dashes. Correct. Dr. Lopez, a calm, reasonable, and respected physician, will serve as our consultant. Remember, dashes cannot replace any comma. As seen in the above example, dashes correctly replace commas that set off a single group of words that have their own commas. Put another way, dashes replace the outside commas for a distinct group of words, while the inside commas remain because they are needed to separate words within the group. Although parentheses de-emphasize the big idea being set off, they can replace dashes in this type of structure. Use this type of dash, then, only when you could opt for parentheses, as seen in the following revision of the above example. Correct. Dr. Lopez, a calm, reasonable, and respected physician, will serve as our consultant. Function 3. To emphasize an idea. Now we come to the dash most likely to be overused or unappreciated in formal writing. The dash whose sole purpose is to emphasize part of a sentence. Unlike the previous two functions, this emphatic dash does not so much deal with syntax as with the particular concept the writer wants to highlight. The subjectivity is one reason why many readers do not care for dashes in formal writing. These comments are often called parenthetical remarks because parentheses can be used instead of dashes to show that an idea is supposedly superfluous. In brief, emphatic dashes set off words and often do not replace any required punctuation. The next two sentences correctly use emphatic dashes, and if they were omitted, no comma or other punctuation is firmly required. If commas were used, they too would be for stylistic effect and emphasis, not because of a rule requiring punctuation. Dashes or commas are thus optional in these examples. Optional punctuation. Report for work by 8 a.m., no matter how far away you live. Optional punctuation. I am giving you official notice, for the second time, that your punctuality is required. At times, however, the emphatic dash does replace required punctuation, a comma of some sort. Why these commas might be required is too varied and complicated to discuss here, so we refer you to Chapter 11 on their many functions. In these next examples, dashes replace commas that would otherwise be required punctuation. My only neighbor, Audie Phillips, is moving to Kansas City. Required punctuation. Audie, who has lived here for 50 years, has mixed feelings about the move. Finally, some emphatic dashes go further, calling attention to an idea, but also suggesting that it is tossed in as a personal aside or comment that perhaps is unnecessary. While such dashes suggest that these ideas might be unnecessary, in truth, they can convey what the writer really wants readers to notice, as seen in the following second example in particular. The mayor, and it pains me to say this, resigned last night. We had heard about her indiscretions, and you know what that means, for months. This variation of the emphatic dash is similar to the just saying remark people use informally to say something that is emphatic, even though it is allegedly just a casual observation. Given such ambiguity, the just saying remark should be used sparingly in formal writing. Grammar trivia. Setting things straight with dashes. The M or N dash are sometimes called an M rule or an N rule, not because they deal with the law, but because they are straight line like a ruler. Hyphens. The hyphen is no less complicated than the visually similar dash. Indeed, dictionaries and usage guidelines do not agree on several aspects of hyphenation, such as when to use the slightly longer in dash or when to use nothing at all in a particular compound word. As stated previously, the M dash should never be mistaken for a hyphen. Thus, to understand what a hyphen does and does not do, read the previous discussion on the dash, especially the M dash. Both the hyphen and the slash can join words, so also read the section later in this chapter on slashes. Unlike the M dash, the N dash can almost always be replaced by hyphen in formal writing. The N dash is shorter than an M dash, but longer than a hyphen. Some punctuation guidelines still require the N dash in certain situations. Example, a range of page numbers or even with certain types of compound words. Still, relatively few readers or organizations expect people to use the in dash even in unpublished formal writing, as this dash is normally the concern of professional typesetters and editors. We therefore suggest using a hyphen even in situations when a publisher or typesetting specialist might replace some hyphens with in dashes. When to use a hyphen. A thorough list of when to use a hyphen is daunting, but keep in mind this overarching function. Hyphen equals combining two or more language choices into one idea. Whether the hyphen combines two words, well-being, adds a prefix to an adjective, half-empty glass, or it can, like an in dash, indicate a range of numbers, pages 2 through 12. The hyphen creates a single idea out of two or more concepts, but keep the hyphen in reserve for when it is truly needed, such as clarifying the intended meaning for a word. For instance, one might use resign as in signing a document again rather than resign to quit. Grammar tip. Although not in total agreement, dictionaries are still a good resource for determining if a word is hyphenated, especially with categories 2, 9, and 10 below. Most spell checkers are similarly useful with these three categories. If a dictionary provides both the hyphenated and non-hyphenating spelling, the latter version has increasingly become the preferred choice in the United States. For those needing more detail, below is a summary in no particular order of the most common situations permitting or requiring a hyphen. Categories marked with an asterisk are explained more formally afterwards. 1. To join complete words in certain compound adjectives. More specifically, to join two or more complete words that together serve as a single adjective, which describes a noun that comes afterwards. Well-dressed person, a one-way street, 10-year-old child, state-of-the-art computer, two-person bed, a grown-up's approval, half-empty glass, check-in time, $5 fee. 2. To join complete words to create certain compound nouns. My mother-in-law, your well-being, several 4-year-olds, a pick-me-up, a stop-off, a recent break-in, editor-in-chief. 3. To indicate a relationship between people or things in a compound noun or adjective. The suburban-urban population, a mother-daughter connection, a McGraw-Hill publication, Chicago-Detroit flight, U.S.-British policy, African-Americans, Jane Doe Smith, Soviet-European tensions. 4. To spell out compound numbers from 21 to 99, 42, 55th, 68, 132. 5. To spell out fractions or proportions. 1/4 of the winnings, 2.5 miles, 2/8 of a meter, a half-hour discussion. 6. To separate numbers that are in numeral form, from 2001 to 2005, a score of 14 to 3, vote of 42 to 12, pages 13 to 21, 2 to 3 odds, ratio of 2 to 1. A colon can also indicate odds or ratios, as in 2 to 3, odds or a ratio of 2 to 1. 7. To join a letter to a word. B-Team, X-Ray, X-Men, T-shirt. Some dictionaries provide a non-hyphenated option for a few words, such as X-Ray. 8. To join a prefix with a number, an abbreviation, or a proper noun. Pre-1900, mid-80s, pre-NATO, mid-April, non-American, trans-Pacific, Neo-Aristotelian. 9. To join a prefix to a word that starts with the same vowel that ended the prefix. Examples: anti-immune, anti-intellectual, re-enter, retro-orbital, semi-informal, semi-identical, co-op, preemptive. Note: despite many exceptions, a hyphen is sometimes used when different vowels are involved, as in semi-arid, anti-aging, meta-ethnic. While some style guides say that it all depends on certain combinations of vowels and that the hyphen helps with pronunciation, these details are difficult to remember. A reliable dictionary is the best tool. Grammar tip. People often over-hyphenate because they start seeing compound words everywhere. As the saying goes, if in doubt, it's usually best to leave it out. Most words in a given sentence are somehow associated with nearby words, so do not consider the hyphen the norm. Hyphenating a compound is the exception and is prudently used to prevent confusion, mispronunciation, or awkward wording. The same caution applies to prefixes and suffixes. Hyphenate sparingly. More on hyphens with compound adjectives. In category 1, above, compound adjectives, Each sample adjective precedes a noun. The hyphen makes it clear that certain words work together as a single concept, describing a noun. The first sentence below uses one of the examples, while the second sentence incorrectly omits the hyphen. Correct. Your check-in time is 3:30 p.m. Your check-in time is 3:30 p.m. Readers of the first version probably would not think it refers to your check or to in time. The second sentence, however, looks awkward, especially compared to the hyphenated version. Still, compound adjectives are not always hyphenated, especially when there is little or no chance of misreading them or awkwardness. Hyphenation often depends on where the adjective appears in relation to the word it modifies. Remember the following rule of thumb. Grammar tip. When a compound adjective appears after the noun it modifies, do not hyphenate. A typical example of this tip occurs when a compound adjective appears after a linking verb, such as is, are, was, were. The adjective bends back to describe the subject of that verb. In the following 3 correct linking verb sentences, no hyphen is needed for the underlined compound adjectives. That street is one way. Mr. Dibney was well dressed as usual. The glass appears half empty. Even though they are listed above in category 1, the single underlined adjectives above all come after the double underlined nouns they modify. As a result, the adjectives are neither confusing nor awkward, suggesting that they should not be hyphenated. Grammar trivia. Verbizing the hyphen. The hyphen is the only punctuation that developed a verb form in English to hyphenate. One does not comma-ize or semicolonate, while the verbs quote and exclaim predate the use of quotation and exclamation marks. More on hyphens with compound nouns. As with compound adjectives, avoid hyphenating every concept that is composed of separate words. Admittedly, whether or not a compound noun is hyphenated might seem arbitrary, yet there are reliable guidelines and resources. Compound nouns are likely to appear in credible dictionaries, and spell checkers are also useful in determining if a noun needs a hyphen. Some dictionaries indicate that the hyphen is optional in some words. Again, the preference nowadays in professional or formal writing is the non-hyphenated option. In fact, some compound nouns that once were frequently hyphenated no longer have a hyphenated option in many, but not all, current dictionaries and style guides, email and chat room being relatively recent examples. Don't confuse compound nouns with compound adjectives. Some terms with slight modification can be either. It depends on how they're used in a sentence. Hyphenated compound adjective. Several 4-year-old children ran amok in the theater. Non-hyphenated compound adjective. The children running amok were 4 years old. Compound noun. Several 4-year-olds ran amok. Compound noun. I saw several 4-year-olds run amok. The first sentence above correctly hyphenates the compound adjective because it appears before its noun. The second sentence correctly omits the hyphen in accordance with the tip given above. That is, 4 years old appears after the noun it describes. And the last 2 sentences contain compound nouns that all grammar style guides when hyphenate, no matter where the words appear in a sentence. The aforementioned grammar tip for compound adjectives is thus irrelevant for compound nouns. More on hyphens indicating a relationship. Although hyphens join words and ideas that are closely related, category 3 in our list refers to how some hyphenated words reflect even more of a joint venture or partnership, emphasizing the nature of that relationship as a whole, not the meaning of each individual word. In mother-daughter connection, for example, the term mother is not describing daughter. Instead, the 2 words work well equally together to refer to how 2 family members relate to each other. Using a hyphen rather than a slash is considered more acceptable. See our section on slashes above and later in this chapter. In regard to the example, Jane Doe Smith, we could assume that Jane used a hyphen to establish a name that reflects an identity associated with 2 families. As with many compound proper nouns, this hyphen is optional and is up to the discretion of the individual whose name it is. Similarly, the hyphen has long been used to join words to create proper nouns and adjectives that indicate ethnicity or cultural identification: Afro-American, Asian American, Irish Americans, Anglo-American, etc. Although there are strong opinions on this matter, the current trend across a diverse range of communities and contexts is to omit the hyphen. Parentheses. Parentheses come in pairs, as shown here, but the term parenthesis refers to just one mark. The most widespread use of parentheses is to set off words, phrases, or sentence, or even many sentences that are not strictly necessary, either grammatically or in terms of meaning. First, we offer a more complete list of when parentheses can be used. Then, we provide a guide for using other punctuation placed near parentheses. Grammar tip. You should be able to lift out anything in parentheses and still have a complete sentence remaining, which should retain the same punctuation. Never put anything in parentheses that is grammatically essential to the sentence. Example, on my birthday, October 23rd, I will be in Boston. Function 1, to provide extra ideas. This function results in what people call a parenthetical comment, an idea that might not be essential, but that adds clarity or, less often, something the writer believes is interesting, such as an aside, a digression, or humor. While commas or a dash can achieve the same purpose, parentheses may be sparingly used in most writing to set off extra ideas. Beware of putting truly essential information in parentheses, but sometimes a sentence is not completely clear without a parenthetical clarification. That apparent contradiction means that the rules can be flexible in this regard. In the first example below, parentheses set off a definition that most people would need, but parentheses are still correct because the sentence technically provides all needed information. Fortunately for him, Tarzan did not suffer from dendrophobia, a severe fear of trees. In the next example, the parenthetical comment might clarify the matter, but is supposedly not truly essential. A reader might still wonder if this particular information is a hint about a point the writer wants to make without explicitly stating it. In any case, the parentheses are technically correct, even if misleading about the writer's real point. 4 employees, 2 newly hired, 2 longtime employees forgot their badges this week. The next 2 examples fall more into the aside category, an interesting fact or comment. The first sentence below seems more like a trivia item when compared to both of the previous examples. The final parenthetical comment provides a personal opinion, not just information. Mel Gibson was the first actor to portray Mad Max, whose real name, according to the first film, was Max Rockatansky. Max was played by one other actor, the one who also played a great villain in Batman film. It is often difficult to distinguish between a parenthetical comment intended as useful information versus an aside with less functional commentary, innuendo, or minutia. The context might clarify the intent, but clear communication avoids parenthetical comments that invite people to read between the lines, or between parentheses to discern the author's meaning. Function 2, to avoid awkward syntax. While they should not be overused, parentheses can set off related words to make a sentence more readable. This function is similar to the previous category of parenthetical elements, but parentheses do not always depend on simply whether the language adds content or is interesting. By setting off a group of words, parentheses can also make complicated sentences easier to read. Commas or dashes can achieve the same purpose, but often parentheses make a sentence less confusing by cutting down on the number of commas already within it. Note, the complexity of the following examples and how setting off certain parts makes each sentence easier to follow. The most famous features of peacocks, the crested head, brilliant plumage, and extremely long feathers, are found only among the males. Despite numerous exceptions, a hyphen is sometimes used after a prefix that ends with a vowel different from the other than the vowel that starts off the root word, as in semi-arid, anti-aging, meta-ethnic. Dictionaries and style guides are not in agreement about many of these words, so use the form that is consistent with the resource you or your organization normally follows. Grammar trivia. Parenthetical minutiae. Outside the United States, parentheses are sometimes called curved brackets or even round brackets. Function 3, to clarify an abbreviation. This category is also a type of parenthetical comment but deserves its own discussion due to the importance of this overlooked or sometimes overused function. In brief, parentheses can explain an abbreviation that might be unclear to readers. The most common approach is to use the full form of the word or words in the abbreviation first and immediately follow it with an abbreviated form that is placed in parentheses. Thereafter, use only the abbreviation, assuming your readers have seen and remembered what it means. The British Broadcasting Company, BBC, made a surprisingly announcement early this morning. 6 hours later, the BBC retracted the announcement. Another approach is to start the abbreviation and follow it with parenthetical clarification. This option works satisfactorily when most, but not all, of your readers already know what the abbreviation means. Paul said that he will BRB. Be right back. He'd better BRB if he wants to ever text me again.